So I know that I said last episode that I was going to be talking about this one, but the anime is going longer than 52 episodes, and not really going to talk about this one. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Why It Didn't Work. The show where I look at an anime that showed some promise in certain areas, but then completely dropped the bandwagon as it went on. And as you can see, this episode's anime is Steins Gate Zero. A sort of sequel spin-off to the original Steins Gate anime, this story takes place after Rintaro Okabe failed to save Magise Kurisu in order to prevent a future war over time machines. Okabe, now traumatized over the experiences of meddling with the past with his reading Steiner ability, chooses to live in the Beta World line where Kurisu is dead. Several months later, Rintaro meets Maho, one of Kurisu's former colleagues who has been working on Amadeus, an artificial intelligence system using Kurisu's memories before her death. Rintaro accepts a request to help out with Amadeus' development by becoming a tester, conversing with the Amadeus Kurisu through his phone. What started off as a spin-off anime that could show a different version of the characters that we know and love while also expanding on them in the series in new and interesting ways, eventually turned into a repetitive and slow-paced mess with a bland production value and underdeveloped or forgotten characters that we love so much from the original. In this show, I'll talk about various aspects of the anime and talk about why it didn't work and how the show ended up being the way that it did. I'll be talking about the production value, treatment of characters both old and new, the mysteries and the twists and turns that it presents, the slow and boring pacing, and the repetitiveness of later episodes. I'll also be using the original Steins Gate series to compare the different points to. So without further ado, let's get to it. Let's start with the overall production value. Now, while the production value of the original series is nothing to write home about, the production value in Steins Gate Zero ranges from passable to just plain bad and dull. Since the spin-off show doesn't have a lot of the high-speed scenes that the original featured, which I'll talk about later, the anime features a lot of exposition dialogue scenes. And this would be fine if they were able to shoot the scenes in interesting ways, but unfortunately, it's just regular conversation scenes that you can find in any regular anime, mostly using still shots or far away shots so that they don't have to fully animate the characters' faces or have lip animation. Anything to save money, I suppose. In most scenes, the animation is fine, and I do love some of the old characters' redesigns, especially with Ruka. However, there just isn't anything interesting to it. But the animation goes well into bad territory in some of the action scenes. Here, the animation is just plain awful. Too many cuts to avoid animating something, and everything looks wonky and weird, and the proportions of some characters just look wrong. It also doesn't help that the first half of the series takes place during the winter, so most scenes are dark and gloomy with no color to them. I know that this is purposeful in order to emphasize Okabe's depression and a new outlook on the world, but come on, you could have done something different with this. And even though the second half of the anime takes place in the summer, a majority of scenes take place at the dead of night or in dark rooms and alleyways. The three central colors in the anime are black, brown, and gray. And I'm sorry, but this isn't enjoyable to watch for 30 episodes. Now, as I mentioned before, the original Steins Gate series production value was nothing to write home about, but it was creative with its direction and how it presented certain scenes. In this anime's first third, when it had a more slice-of-life feel to it with wacky and quirky characters, the animation was fine. However, it used crazy camera angles and different shots in order to emphasize Okabe's eccentric personality of movements as his mad scientist persona, Hyoin Koma. And that made the first thirds more slow and laid-back pacing more enjoyable. However, when shit started to go down and they start to mess around with time and Mayuri gets killed off for the first time, the animation changes. We get different moments of the animation slowing down for dramatic effect, the colors changing and expressing anxiety, rapid fire cuts to invoke stress and disorder, and there are even some scenes that use different forms of animation. For example, my favorite scene in this regard is when Okabe fears that Kurisu and Mayuri are in danger from an evil organization back at the lab, so he races back. In this scene, everything turns white with black penciling in order to emphasize Okabe's current goal and frantic thoughts. His frantic movements, the shaking of his hand when he tries to open the door, it's a really good scene. There are other moments like that in the anime, so that while the regular animation is nothing amazing or spectacular, it can be interesting and exciting in certain scenes. Steins Gate Zero features none of this, and its overall production value is just dull and bland. Now let's talk about how the spin-off show treated its characters both old and new. In my opinion, our favorite characters were very underused and the new characters presented just weren't as interesting as them.
Characters like Okabe, Mayuri, and Daru make sense in this version. They are the press for the majority of the show, considering what the three of them went through and the choice that Okabe had to make. Mayuri and Daru trying to look on the positive side of things, but Okabe definitely had been a different person than who he was before. Past supporting character Suzuha gets more screen time in the show, both trying to help her dad get together with her future mom Yuki so that she can be born, while also trying to get Okabe to go back in time to stop Kurisu's death and prevent the start of World War III.
However, it's the rest of the characters from the original that really get mistreated, mostly in that they're barely in this version. And when we do see them, they don't do anything exciting or new, just repeats of their character quirks from the previous season.
Ferris is still the cute cat maid, but without her complex story with her father, she's just an energetic girl who dresses and acts like a cat. Yugo and his daughter Nai don't really do anything outside of what they did in the original series, though Okabe now knowing about Yugo's military background brings us some interesting conversations, but that's eventually forgot about. Moeka is barely in this one, and without her being a secret agent for CERN, she's just a quiet, big-chested woman with glasses.
But the worst of the old cast that's mishandled is Ruka. Oh, my sweet baby Ruka.
Now, while in the original series, my favorite character and storyline was that of Ruka and her trying to change the past so that she's born biologically male, but giving that up in order to save Mayuri's life, there were some things I didn't like about how the show treated her. There were one or two jokes about people thinking that she's a girl while the others reminding them that he's a guy. We, of course, later learn Ruka's true feelings, though the series still has a similar joke in its follow-up movie, but nothing harmless, honestly. In the spin-off show, though, they do the same jokes with Ruka again and again, with Okabe not making any change to fix this or talk to Ruka about it. Since Okabe can remember all of the different timelines because he can read Steiner, he knows about Ruka's true feelings, but makes no effort to do anything about it. Otherwise, Ruka is barely used in this anime, just used to introduce new character Kaguri, who I'll get to soon. Ruka even acknowledges the fact that she's really out of the loop unlike the others, in a honestly very sweet scene between her and Suzuha, but the anime quickly brushes it aside, saying that Okabe keeps her out of the loop because he wants her to be his constant, someone who isn't affected by all this crazy stuff. In the end, though, that's a very big mistreatment of her character and not allowing her to do anything with the rest of the characters.
Though that isn't the worst part of how Ruka is handled here, though I'll have to save that for later. Not that the new characters introduced in this spin-off show are any interesting at all.
The only new and interesting character coming out of this is Maho, a co-worker of Kurisu who gets caught up in the ongoing development of World War III and eventually joins Okabe's group of friends. I enjoyed Okabe and Maho's dynamic and thought that they worked well off each other. That's until I realized that she's just a poor replacement for Kurisu, lacking the right personality or charm that she had and the great chemistry that she and Okabe shared. Here, she's just used as a replacement and nothing more by the end. Honestly, just allowing Daru to make a lot of weird lolly jokes about her, despite the fact that, well, she's an adult. I like her, but she's not used well here. Seeing Yuki in full form here was a nice touch, and it was sweet to see the developing relationship between her and Daru. But besides that, she's just kind of bland. She isn't used anywhere interesting and is just here to be Daru's future husband and Suzuha's future mother. Though her and Suzuha's interactions were pretty cute. Our friends Futaba and Kanade are pointless here. They just sort of hang around and don't do anything. The show tries to introduce some intrigue with after Okabe manages to escape a forced new timeline where Kurisu is alive and Mayuri is dead, Futaba seems to remember the events of the timeline, leading Okabe to theorize that Futaba also has the ability to read Steiner. However, this plot point is completely forgotten about and doesn't come up ever again. There's also Kaguri, a mysterious girl with amnesia who we later learn is Mayuri's adoptive daughter in the future and came to the past with Suzuha, but eventually ran away due to certain circumstances.
Thankfully, the anime doesn't take that long to reveal this twist, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty fucking obvious twist. We are more wise to your ways.
Kaguri eventually gets her memories back, but is eventually brainwashed again by the villains and turned into their sleeper agent. The thing that doesn't work about this plotline is that it just isn't interesting. It doesn't do anything to further our main characters and just proves to be a distraction for the main plot. In the end, she's just a Kurisu lookalike with bigger breasts. There's nothing to her and nothing about her is interesting. Speaking of the villains, gee, I wonder who the bad guy is. Out of all of the new characters introduced in this spin-off, I wonder who the villain could be. And last up is Amadeus, the AI created using Kurisu's memories.
Now the existence of this character is great, forcing Okabe to confront the choice that he made in the woman that he loved, her death continually killing him inside. There are some great conversations between the two and brought some interesting scenes together. However, even though Amadeus looks like Kurisu, she isn't her.
She doesn't have the same personality and dynamic that she shared with Okabe. Her tsundere-ness is gone, and that was something that a majority of fans enjoyed about the character. She was well written and a breath of fresh air from the tsundere characters that we've seen in the past. However, Amadeus is an entirely different being and is just a bad replacement for the real Kurisu, only making me want to watch the original series just to see her again. Much like with Kaguri, she doesn't bring anything new or interesting to the table and is easily forgettable. It also doesn't help that the possibility of getting Okabe to confront his decision is tossed away in lieu of different plot points, so Amadeus' entire point of existing doesn't come into play until the second to last episode.
Now let's talk about the anime's lack of exciting or interesting mysteries with surprising twists and turns. I've already talked about some of the mysteries in Steins 8-0, like with Kaguri's amnesia and the fact that Futaba can read Steiner, but as I mentioned before, these mysteries just aren't exciting or just too damn obvious.
We can see the answers to all of them coming a mile away, so when the anime takes a while to get to these answers, the episodes just drag. So when the twists come into play, like Kaguri being revealed as a sleeper agent or Mayuri being killed off again with Suzuha this time, they are either just not interesting or repeats of the twists that we got in the original series. They just aren't fresh here, and none of it makes the anime exciting in any way.
Now in the original Steins Gate series, the mysteries were engaging and interesting, making you want to watch each episode to get more clues into the overall answer. The twists and turns were sudden and surprising, making the viewer never know what was going to happen next, but worried that something bad could happen to their characters at any moment.
Seriously, the first time I watched the anime when certain agents busted in with Moeka and shot Mayuri dead, I was shocked beyond all belief. This made the rest of the anime's race of Okabe fixing a new timeline that they created in order to save Mayuri and stop the loop of her death thrilling and exciting. And because the characters were so enjoyable, it hurt to see some of these girls, like Ferris and Ruka, give up their happiness and dreams in order to save Mayuri. But at the same time, you really want Mayuri to stay alive, making a complex dynamic while watching each episode progress and seeing Okabe slowly get back to the main timeline one step at a time.
The same can't be said for this version though. The charm of the original series was its unpredictability, and this spin-off show has none of that. Another big problem that Steins Gate 0 had was its slow and boring pace, and had so many scenes that just felt like it existed to waste time. There are so many scenes where it seems like nothing is accomplished, plotlines just pad the anime's runtime of 23 episodes, and fanservice scenes that feel completely unnecessary. More unnecessary than they did in the original.
Plotlines and character moments that are suddenly brought up and then never mentioned again. Time just feels wasted in this anime, making me really feel that this anime could have at least been 12 or 13 episodes. As I mentioned before, we just have scene after scenes about characters talking about shit that either isn't interesting or just a retread of what we saw in the original, except not exciting this time around. The anime also tries to do the same thing that the original did in making lots of slice of life scenes in the beginning to make us go crazy when shit goes down. But as I talked about already, that just doesn't work this time.
We already witnessed this change in tone and plotline in the original, so it appearing here again doesn't have the same freshness and creativity that we saw in the original. Speaking of which, one of the best aspects of the original series was its sudden shift in tone during the middle of the anime.
The first half, as I mentioned before, was a sci-fi slice-of-life show with crazy people trying to create a time machine and make bananas green. This all changes though when their time machine work. Okabe changes the past in different ways at the request of his friends, and agents of CERN bust in, demands the time machine, and kills Mayuri. Okabe uses the time machine to go back in time in order to reverse all the changes he made to the past in order to reach the main timeline where Mayuri is not killed again and again. It's because of this that we get to dive into these seemingly simple characters and learn how complex they are. Ferris and her backstory for father, Ruka's desire to look on the outside as she feels on the inside, Moeka and a whole deal with being a sleeper agent of CERN, Suzuha's desire to see her dad in the past, that being Daru, and so on and so forth. The plot in the original Steins Gate anime keeps on changing, but this change feels deserved every time, because these elements were built up and foreshadowed throughout the entire anime. And because we got to know these characters in the first third and learn how enjoyable and lovable they are, we are with them every step of the way as their complexity comes to the surface.
In Steins Gate 0, the shift in tone and purposeful slow pacing in the beginning doesn't add up to anything. Just a retread of what we saw before, except without the creativity and originality that the original series had. It isn't helped by the constant repetitionness that Steins Gate 0 had, either by doing stuff that happened similarly in the original series, or just having conversations of repeating the same points again and again.
For example, the conversations of different characters like Daru and Suzuha trying to convince Okabe to go back in the past and save Kurisu in order to prevent World War III happen again and again and again. with little to no changes to the conversation. Mayuri finally deciding to take action into her own hands, features 3 episodes of her telling Okabe why she's doing this and Okabe trying to convince her not to. Just the same conversations again and again. However, in episode 21, when Okabe manages to make it back to 2011 and receives a well-deserved punch in the face by Daru, Okabe turns back into his mad scientist persona of Hyoin Kyoma.
This actually got me excited. After months and months of just seeing Okabe in a depressed state and refusing to do anything to fix time and save the world, we see the Rintaro Okabe from the original series in full bloom.
I felt really nostalgic as Hyoin Kyoma spouted out his insane phrases and seeing the weird poses that he always makes, seeing Daru so happy and Maho confused as all hell. Okabe then forms a plan to save Mayuri and Suzuha, which involves everyone. Ferris gets something to do, Ruka gets something to do, Yugo gets something to do, even Moeka, who is barely in the series, is finally used to great effect. Finally, shit is getting done and everyone is involved. However, Mayuri and Suzuha still get killed off with nothing being accomplished, so we see Okabe going back in time again, feeling the press, but then eventually assuming his Hyoin Kyoma persona.
Anime! We just saw this! Why are you doing basically the same exact fucking thing again? Ugh! More of the time in the anime felt wasted because they decided to take episodes to change the plot altogether.
One is where someone seems to change the past and the future, with Okabe being the only one who knows about it because he can read Steiner. The difference in this timeline is that Okabe decided not to change time in the original series to save Mayuri because of his love for Kurisu. So in this timeline, Mayuri's dead and Kurisu is alive. So the anime takes a sudden stop in its current plot lines and developments to have Okabe in this different timeline for 1 episode.
Except, the funny thing is, this is the best episode in the entire spin-off series. Why? Because it has Kurisu in it and the wonderful chemistry that she and Okabe had.
Some of the scenes in this episode really reminded me of the original series and why I loved it so much. Plus it adds context to an event in the original series, expanding on something that we didn't know before. Something that this entire spin-off anime should have been about. However, in the context of the show itself, the episode feels like a time waster in the overall plot and is unnecessary in the end, even though it's still the best episode in the series. There was also the plotline of Okabe waking up 25 years in the future, having failed in his mission of going back in time to save Mayuri and Suzuha and being kidnapped and tortured by the enemy organization.
Now, while this scenario and setting sounds cool on paper, as World War III has been talked about endlessly by Suzuha and the need to avoid it, the end result just kind of feels underwhelming.
While it's cool to see some characters in this post-apocalyptic light, like a calmer and thinner Daru and a harsher Suzuha, some of the characters just feel out of place. Like Ferris, for example, who it looks like nothing has changed about her, with still having her pink curly hair and cat-like personality. Still saying the word meow in certain sentences. While it's nice to see her kick butt, it's a little distracting seeing this cute anime girl against the backdrop of the post-apocalyptic world and the characters reflecting it. Throughout the episode, the only enjoyment I was getting out of this new setting and scenario was the redesign of Ruka. Here, Ruka's face is more thinner and she's rocking a long flowing ponytail. She's also using katana to slice up enemies in such a badass way, calling back to the original series where Ruka was training to be a swordsman. Again, expanding on something from the original in a new and interesting way. This Ruka seems more confident in herself and her appearance, being the best she can be and protecting the ones she cares about. But of course, there's the Steins Gate Zero we're talking about, and the series doesn't like to do something new and interesting, and only likes to do something that is predictable and lame. So after fending off a mob of soldiers on her own, Ruka dies in Okabe's arms with a smile on her face, happy to be useful to her group of friends and seeing Okabe alive for one last time.
This is the moment in the series where I threw up my hands in the air and said, you know what? Black Clover is actually doing pretty good right now. Sure, the beginnings of the anime was absolute shit, but it's been coming into its own for a while now. Plus that Black Bulls versus Vito fight was pretty cool. And not so bad, Black Clover. As for you, Steins Gate Zero, fuck you!
Now, look, I'm not gonna say that Steins Gate treatment of Ruka in the past was the best that it could be, as I talked about before. In that, Ruka decides to give up living as a biological woman, sacrificing her psychological and physical happiness so that Okabe can undo time and save Mayuri. But in this, it can be argued that the story still sympathized with Ruka's dilemma, even if it didn't feel the need to devote the time to properly deal with the consequences of such a sacrifice.
But in the end, you felt for Ruka and understood her final decision. Must I play the clip again?
What you look like is neither here nor there. People are idiots. The genuine you transcends that rot.
This twist in Steins Gate Zero ultimately turns Ruka into the sacrificial queer character who gets killed off after pining for the hero from a distance, just so Okabe can somehow be even more motivated to go back in time in order to undo World War III. In a spin-off series that barely used Ruka or even acknowledges the stuff that she went through in the original, it's insultingly lazy writing and a horrible conclusion to Ruka's character arc. And now, of course, since this is a time travel story and is a prequel to the original ending, obviously we know that Ruka doesn't stay dead forever. In the next episode, where Ruka decides to start his 3,000 time leap journey for every 2 weeks in order to get back to 2011, we immediately have Ruka alive again. But this just makes the death even more pointless.
Steins Gate Zero could have done anything. Fucking anything. With this post-apocalyptic future where our characters are different and have been changed. But instead, we get a few hallways and busted up streets and boring conversation after boring conversation that eventually leads to a pointless character death. This is the ultimate conclusion of Steins Gate Zero's lack of originality and lazy writing. This series isn't fresh like the original, it's just a waste of time. Now, like I did for my Citrus video, let me go and explain what I wish the series would have been about with the elements that it presented.
First, a few changes. Number 1, cut the episode count in half and make it 12 to 13 episodes. Take out new characters Kaguri, the Professor, and their plotlines. Maybe keep in Maho and her connection to Amadeus. Don't have any out-of-nowhere time leaps into the past or the future. Just have the series be about Okabe coming to terms with the decision he made and have Amadeus be in the center of it. The beginning can be the same, with Okabe meeting Maho and deciding to become a tester for Amadeus. This way, Okabe can confront his past decision and come to terms with it. Every episode, you can focus on one of the characters helping Okabe through this, learning more about them and expanding on their characters in this new scenario and setting. You can also still have the plotline of Suzuha continually trying to convince Okabe to go back in time and save Kurisu. Keep in the confrontation of Maho calling Okabe out for delusionally believing Amadeus to be the real Kurisu as well, ultimately leading to Okabe giving up Amadeus and finally coming to terms with the decision he made in the past, resolving to finally fix it once and for all. So after a punch in the face by Daro, because honestly that moment was awesome, Okabe becomes Hyoin Kyoma again and does everything he can to prevent World War III. With this storyline, you have a spin-off show that expands and ties into the original in new and interesting ways, giving the old characters time to shine and not having new characters and plotlines add nothing to the overall story. And at the center of it all, you have a man coming to terms with the decision he made in his life and learning to accept his responsibility to save the world and prevent World War III.
This is what the series should have been about. But instead, what we got was a very poor production value, this treatment of old characters and boring new characters and plotlines, a slow pace where nothing was accomplished and time was always wasted, repetitiveness of the same events over and over, and just a clear lack of direction. Steins Gate Zero isn't the worst anime I've ever seen, but as a fan of the original who was looking forward to the spin-off show for a while, I just feel like a parent when their child did something bad. I'm not angry at you, I'm just disappointed. And that's why Steins Gate Zero didn't work. Oh, that one felt good to get out. Though, I do have to say, after the Citrus and Darlene and the Franks videos, I've noticed that it's really fun to piss off a group of people. So, maybe I should do that for the next episode. But what series airing this season would allow me to piss off a certain group of people? I really don't like yaoi anime.